Do you know somebody who is impulsive? They act without thinking about the consequences. Do you know somebody who is disinhibited? They say things without thinking about it. They act inappropriately.
I know a cute kid who, after he sustained a concussion, no matter how hard he tries and to remember to raise his hand, when the teacher talks to him or asks something, he said it's just like it pops out of him, like he has no control over when words come out of his mouth.
Do you know somebody who's really irritable? Maybe even to the point of being verbally or even physically aggressive?
I met a woman who suffered from an acquired brain injury. She had a stroke, and after her stroke, her family told me she was very irritable. She was very short-tempered. That wasn't her nature. That wasn't who she was before.
There's a teenager that goes to one of my kids' schools, that happy girl, cute girl, has everything going for her. She's on the soccer team and had a really serious concussion her sophomore year, and she has been depressed ever since. And she thinks about all the time the girl she used to be and really tries hard to be that girl. She doesn't have the ability, as hard as she tries, to be that happy girl anymore because something in her brain is different now.
If you know someone who exhibits any of these behaviors that we've been talking about, they may have had a brain injury.
Injury to the brain can cause all of these difficulties.
I want to tell you about a young man named Sam. So Sam was a great kid from a great family, pretty typical kid, and one day he was out on his bike and crashed. It was very fast after that accident that things went downhill really quickly for him. A lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, became very isolated as he withdrew. He ended up not graduating from high school as he struggled in school with memory, and eventually got into drugs. In order to fund his drug habit, he started stealing, committing identity theft, fraud, and ultimately he ended up in prison. It's really important to remember that it didn't have to be like this. With good neurorehabilitation, you can find strategies to manage depression, anxiety, help with memory, and find options and job skills that work for you within your new abilities.
After a brain injury, people can really struggle emotionally. They can be more depressed. They can have a lot of anxiety. And really frequently, they can be more irritable than they were before the injury.
Depending on a survivor's recovery stage, they can go through a lot of emotional phases. Things that wouldn't bring up emotions in the past are right there on their sleeve all the time.
After a brain injury, people can really struggle with thinking. It may be more difficult to pay attention, to concentrate. They can struggle with memory. Often people don't remember conversations that they've had a few minutes ago or earlier that day.
Concentration and focus is one of those things that I think most of us take for granted because we can sit down with a book and attune to it for more than a couple of minutes. But if you have a brain injury, your brain gets tired really, really fast. And it's hard, even if you want to pay attention to something for very long. And if you're getting additional stimulation, like visual or auditory stimulation, you're gonna fatigue that much more, and you remember less and less and less, no matter how hard you pay attention.
Brain injury is much more common than people know. Each year in the US, over 2 million people have a traumatic brain injury. Over 5 million people are living with disability related to brain injury. And that is likely an underestimate because there's many more people out there with milder brain injury symptoms that are still really struggling. A huge percentage of people in prison have had an injury to their brain. It's estimated at over 60%, and some estimates put it even higher. Depression is much higher after brain injury. Suicide is much higher after brain injury. Homelessness is much higher after brain injury.
The thing about brain injury that I'm not sure a lot of people understand, a lot of support people around a brain injured person understand, is that with therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, neural rehabilitation therapy, things can improve immensely.
Brainstorm for Brain Injury is a nonprofit organization that was started by myself and 2 other founders to help people with brain injury find help and find hope.
Our goal is to help brain injury caregivers and survivors connect with resources to live their best post-brain injury life.
With Brainstorm for Brain Injury, we're trying to fill a hole or a gap that we feel is in our world for survivors and caregivers of brain injury. There are many resources out there to help survivors and even caregivers, but those resources sometimes are so hard to find. They need to know places to go to help them get to that place they want to be, and we want to be there to help them.
I am a rehabilitation doctor, and I work with people who have had brain injuries. I've worked in this field for over 30 years, and I've seen so many people with brain injury that do not get the help they need. They continue to struggle. There's help out there, but they don't know where to find it.
My husband had a brain injury 10 years ago, and I just feel like there's not enough education out there to help these survivors.
A few years ago, one of my children was involved in an accident that resulted in a skull fracture and a traumatic brain injury. And I realized that there were probably a lot of options out there, but I didn't know how to find them. And there wasn't anyone guiding me through that situation to know how best to help my child, but also to help our family. It changed our whole entire family.
A brain injury is just what it says. A brain injury is an injury to the brain, and it can come from many different things. It can come from trauma, it can come from a stroke, it can come from infection. Cerebral palsy or injury at birth is a type of brain injury. If a person has a severe brain injury, it may be obvious, it may be easy to detect, easy to diagnose. Person may have difficulty walking, they may have difficulty talking, but many brain injuries are not so obvious, and they're much more difficult to diagnose and to see. A person may have difficulty thinking, they may have emotional difficulties, and that person may look normal, but might really struggle.
From a layperson's perspective, we look at everybody and we only see what's going on the outside. And there are a lot of brain injury survivors that walk and talk and they move and sound just like everybody else, but there's an injury on the inside. So just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it isn't there. And it will impact them emotionally. And you're just gonna think that someone's behavior is a little bit odd or someone's response is a little bit odd. And really the cause of that is a brain injury. And the general public, we have a tendency to get very short and frustrated with these people not knowing that they have this disability. Brain injury is often called an invisible disability for that reason.
To look at my survivor, you can't tell he has a brain injury. When we came home from the hospital after my husband's brain injury, he was a different person. I had no idea that this was going to affect his personality. Not only did it change his personality, he was now dealing with issues of not being able to sleep, headaches all day, every day, sensitivity to light, noise, confusion. He had gone from being a left brain person, highly successful banker, to a right brain person who wanted to redecorate my house. And this is something that the grandkids can't see and the kids can't see. But I know they're there because I've learned about it. And so I'm trying to teach them how to understand and better help their dad.
Being a brain injury mom is probably one of the hardest things I have ever done in my whole entire life. When they discharge you from the hospital, you have no idea what to do. And it is the scariest thing to go home with a child that you don't know anymore, you don't know what their needs are, and you have no idea how to help them.
When I see brain injury survivors and their families in clinic, their families are often struggling. The brain injury survivor is often not the same person that they were. Maybe not the same person that they married, maybe not the same parent that they had, not as engaged. That it can be really difficult for family members.
Brain injury does not happen in a vacuum. It doesn't just happen to one person. Brain injury can have a massive effect on your relationships. It's really hard to relate to someone that has a hard time thinking, has a hard time controlling their emotions, and just they don't understand that sometimes the things that they say are going to have such a negative impact on the other person. When you live with someone that maybe has violent tendencies after their injury, or they just are very angry all the time, or they lose their ability to work, that's going to impact a family. That's going to impact every single one of the interpersonal relationships.
Through the work we've done at Brainstorm for Brain Injury, we have been amazed at how many people out there don't understand brain injury, don't know how to help brain injury survivors. That's our goal, is to help brain injury survivors. And we have found that what we really need to do is educate others.
Brainstorm for Brain Injury is to help people thrive in this community. We want to better educate not just survivors and caregivers, but medical professionals, healthcare workers, teachers, police departments, those who run our prisons. We want them to better understand who they're dealing with.
Join us, help us. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that and truly make a positive impact in a brain injury survivor or caregiver's life.
We want to be the conduit to help them find the things they need to better their life. Their lives can be great. Maybe they're not the same, but that doesn't mean they can't be great.
So please help us to make a positive impact in the lives of brain injury survivors and their families.